What if the monster wasn't hiding in the shadows of the forest, but was already inside the house, waiting, watching, and living among you for days before he finally struck? This is not a hypothetical nightmare. It is the chilling, unresolved heart of one of Germany's most infamous cold cases, the Hinterkaifeck murders. In March of 1922, on a secluded Bavarian farmstead bearing that name, 6 people were brutally murdered with a mattock, a farming tool akin to a pickaxe. The victims were the patriarch Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, Victoria's 2 children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph, and the family's new maid Maria Baumgartner. But the true terror of Hinterkaifeck lies not just in the violence of the act, but in the eerie, psychologically devastating events that preceded and followed it. The evidence suggests, with a bone-deep certainty, that the killer didn't just arrive and leave on that grim day. He may have been a ghost in the machine of the family's life for nearly a week, secretly inhabiting their home, eating their food, listening to their conversations, and biding his time while they whispered about the strange sounds in the attic. Let's reconstruct the scene. Hinterkaifeck was not just remote, it was a lonely island in a sea of fields and forest, over a kilometer from the nearest village of Kaifeck. The Grubers were a reclusive bunch, subjects of local gossip concerning a possible incestuous relationship between Andreas and his daughter Victoria, rumors fueled by the unknown paternity of Victoria's 2 children. The atmosphere was already thick with private tension when, in the days leading up to the murders, Andreas made a series of unsettling reports. He found a strange newspaper in the house. He discovered footprints in the snow leading from the edge of the woods to the farm, but none leading back. He heard footsteps in the attic at night. A set of house keys went missing. Most hauntingly, he told neighbors he believed someone was secretly living in the upper floor of the homestead or the adjacent barn, coming and going while they slept or worked. He investigated, but found nothing. Or did he find something or someone he wasn't supposed to? On Thursday, March 30th, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived. She would later tell her sister in a letter that she found the farm deeply unsettling, that there was a palpable sense of fear. The next day, Friday, March 31st, was the last day the family was ever seen alive. A neighbor reported seeing smoke from the chimney, a normal sight. By Saturday, they were absent from their usual routines. On Sunday, concerned friends visited. They found the farm eerily silent. The cattle were in their stalls, unfed and unmilked. In the barn, they made the first discovery: the bodies of Andreas Gruber and his daughter Cecilia Gruber, and Victoria's daughter, little Cecilia, all killed by massive, crushing blows to the head from a mattock. The scene was one of overwhelming, intimate violence. The searchers, now in a state of panic, moved to the house. There, in a bedroom, they found Victoria and her son Joseph, also bludgeoned to death. Little Joseph's head was virtually pulverized. Finally, in her own attic room, they found the maid Maria. She had been killed last, it seemed, perhaps having come running at the sounds of the carnage below. The official timeline, later established by the post-mortem, placed the time of death on Friday, March 31st. But the farm's sinister secret had only just begun to reveal itself. The investigation, led by a Munich police commissioner named Georg Reingruber, was massive for its time, but plagued by primitive forensic techniques and local superstition. What they uncovered painted a picture of a killer of almost preternatural calm and cruelty. The killer had not fled immediately. After the murders, he had stayed on the farm for several days. He had fed the cattle and locked them back in their stalls. He had eaten food from the Gruber's pantry. He had, most bizarrely of all, tended to the livestock and the household as if he were the new owner. This was not a frenzied attack followed by a frantic escape. This was a methodical, cold-blooded takeover. Consider the psychological implications for a moment. Imagine the killer alone in that quiet, remote farmhouse with 6 corpses. The world outside carried on, unaware. He could sleep in their beds, eat their bread, perhaps even sit at their table, surrounded by the profound silence he himself had created. Was this a form of possession? A twisted fulfillment of a fantasy? Or simply the pragmatic act of a criminal waiting for the cover of night or a storm to pass? The fact that he performed chores suggests a chilling familiarity with farm life and a desire to maintain appearances to any distant observer who might see smoke from the chimney or lit window and think nothing was amiss. The suspect list was long and convoluted, a testament to the family's fraught relationships. There was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor who had once courted Victoria and was the supposed father of her son, Josef. He was deeply embroiled in a bitter paternity suit with her. He was among the first discoverers of the bodies, and witnesses reported his behavior as oddly detached. He also owned a mattock that mysteriously went missing. Was this a crime of passion and financial obligation, brutally erased? Then there was the theory of a mysterious stranger, a former servant or a passing vagrant. The missing house keys and the prior break-in at a local monastery pointed to someone with knowledge of the area. Some speculated it was a deranged soldier traumatized by the recent World War. Others whispered of supernatural forces, of a curse upon the land. The local community, steeped in Catholic tradition and folklore, was quick to see the hand of the devil in the meticulous brutality. One of the most persistent and compelling theories involves Karl Gabriel, Victoria's husband and the father of her daughter, Tizilia. He was believed to have died in World War I. But what if he hadn't? What if he had returned, wounded, changed, and enraged to find his wife living with her parents amid scandalous rumors? A veteran would know how to kill efficiently and would possess the nerve to stay in a battlefield, even one of his own making. This theory, however, has never been substantiated. The investigation eventually stalled. Leads dried up. The farm itself was razed to the ground in 1923, as if trying to erase the memory from the landscape. The case files were later destroyed in World War II bombings, taking with them irreplaceable evidence and notes. Hinterkaifeck was left as a ghost story, a true crime puzzle with half the pieces missing. But let's delve deeper into the psychology of the scene. The choice of weapon, the mattock, is significant. It was not a brought weapon, like a gun or a knife. It was a tool of the farm, of daily labor. This suggests either spontaneity or a powerful symbolic act. The killer used the very instrument of the family's livelihood to destroy them. It was an intimate, physically demanding, and messy way to kill. It requires close proximity and repeated forceful swings. This speaks to immense rage or a need for absolute, overkill-level certainty. The sparing of the animals is another critical detail. A truly psychopathic, rage-fueled killer might have slaughtered the livestock. A thief might have stolen them, but the killer fed them. This single act creates a profound dissonance. The capacity for meticulous care towards animals juxtaposed with the utter annihilation of an entire human family, including 2 small children. It hints at a mindset that perhaps saw the Grubers as specifically deserving of punishment, while the animals were innocent property to be maintained. Was this a personal, targeted vengeance, then? The duration of the killer's stay is the ultimate psychological enigma. It transforms the crime from murder into a form of ritualistic occupation. Dr. Richard Helmer, a modern forensic scientist who re-examined the case, pointed out that this behavior aligns with certain power and control fantasies. The killer wasn't just after their lives, he wanted their world. He wanted to sit in their space, surrounded by the proof of his dominance, and play master of the domain. This is a signature far more telling than the murders themselves. It suggests a deep, pre-existing obsession, a grudge that required not just execution, but a period of symbolic consumption. Who in the family's orbit could have harbored such a profound, all-consuming hatred? Someone who felt wronged, cheated, or humiliated by them. Someone for whom the remote farm was a symbol of something they coveted or despised. Lorenz Schlittenbauer fits this profile in many ways. The paternity suit was a public and financial humiliation. If he was forced to pay for a child he believed was not his, or if Victoria's relationship with her own father was an abomination in his eyes, his rage could have festered into something monstrous. His knowledge of the farm's layout and routines would have allowed him to hide there undetected. His participation in the discovery could have been a way to insert himself into the narrative and steer suspicion away. But what about the possibility of a duo? The scale of the crime, controlling and killing 6 people, including a strong farmer like Andreas, is a lot for one person. Could Schlittenbauer have had an accomplice? Or was it a father-son team from a neighboring farm, as some later speculative books have proposed? The logistical challenge is real, but the behavioral evidence of one person calmly staying afterwards seems to point more to a lone wolf, someone comfortable in his own company and his own twisted thoughts. The children's murders are particularly hard to reconcile. A killer seeking vengeance on the adults might have spared the children or killed them quickly as witnesses. The sheer violence visited upon 2-year-old Joseph suggests either a need to eliminate the bloodline completely, supporting the paternity theory, or the actions of someone in a state of uncontrollable blind fury that made no distinctions. It could also be the act of someone so detached from humanity that a child was no different from an adult, simply another object in the path of destruction. Let's consider the crime scene staging, or lack thereof. There was no attempt to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Valuables were left untouched. The killer made no effort to hide the bodies in a meaningful way. They were left where they fell. This is often interpreted by criminal profilers as a sign of a personal, emotional homicide. The killer's primary goal was the act of killing itself, not material gain. The message was the murder. The staying afterwards was for his own satisfaction, not for constructing an alibi. The World War I impact on the German psyche cannot be overstated. By 1922, the country was reeling from defeat, economic ruin, and hyperinflation. Society was fractured, and many men were traumatized, displaced, and brutalized by years of trench warfare. This context creates a pool of potential suspects who were already desensitized to violence, accustomed to death, and possibly suffering from what we now call PTSD. A veteran might have seen the isolated farm as an outpost, the family as the enemy, and the mattock as just another tool of war. His post-murder garrisoning of the farm could have mirrored the holding of a captured position. The destruction of the case files in 1943 is a tragedy for historiography, but also a strangely fitting coda. Hinterkaifeck was consumed by the very same wave of violence that may have spawned it, the cycle of war and destruction that defined early 20th century Germany. The truth was literally bombed into oblivion, leaving only the stark, skeletal story behind the strange noises, the footprints, the brutal deaths, and the ghost who stayed for supper. Modern attempts to solve the case using DNA have been fraught with difficulty. The bodies were exhumed in 2007 for analysis, but decades of burial, the lime originally thrown on the graves, and the tumultuous handling of remains over the years have degraded potential evidence. While mitochondrial DNA was extracted, there were no definitive matches to conclusively rule suspects in or out. The ground, it seems, is still keeping its secret. So we are left with the haunting questions, the psychological echoes. Hinterkaifeck endures because it is a perfect storm of the macabre, the isolated setting, the family secrets, the premonitions of doom, the gruesome weapon, and that unimaginable, lingering aftermath. It taps into a universal fear that is far deeper than the fear of a stranger breaking in. It is the fear that the stranger is already inside, that he has been listening, that he knows your routines, that he is in the attic or the barn or the crawl space, waiting for the right moment to step out of the shadows and cease to be a ghost. It is the fear that home is not a sanctuary, but a trap where the walls themselves have witnessed your fate. The legacy of Hinterkaifeck is not just a true crime story, it is a dark parable about isolation, secrecy, and the monsters that human resentment can breed. It warns us that the most dangerous threats are often the ones we sense but cannot see, the ones that weave themselves into the fabric of our daily lives before they tear it all apart. The farm is gone, but the mystery stands like a gnarled tree on a barren hill, whispering a question we can never fully answer. Who was the shadow in the house, and what did he want, besides everything? In the end, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain a locked-room mystery set in the open air of the Bavarian countryside. The room was locked not by bolts, but by distance, by silence, and by time. And inside that room, a killer performed a private play of death and dominion, his audience 6 silent witnesses who took the final act to their graves. We can only piece together the fragments, listen to the echoes from 1922, and wonder about the face of the man who, for a few days in spring, became the master of a house of the dead. We unravel these dark puzzles so we might understand the boundaries of the human psyche, and I'd be honored to have you join this exploration, so consider subscribing to the channel.